you want to see that diploma on the wall that says, yeah, they went to school for this and they got trained. But for the arts, it's not as necessary. Now, I had a good experience and I learned a lot. Like I said, I learned all the foundational things that I needed to know in audio school. But the thing, like I was starting to mention before, is that it's upside down. Is that what you actually need is experience, and a traditional school doesn't do a great job of offering experience. So I wouldn't recommend going to audio school without coupling it with like something like an internship. And, you know, there's times where I'll get people sending me requests for a job. And I say, you know, that's not what we do. We've got internships. And sometimes people say, well, like, you know what? I think that I deserve to be paid for my efforts. It's like, okay, but like, if you don't have any experience, there's so much that you don't know. You think you know because you know attack and release settings, and you know all about delays and reverbs, and you know like different modes on a console or something, depending on what school they came from. But if you don't know these other things, then there's a lot that you don't know. And and that's where I think an internship is really valuable for getting started, because it allows you to see, for good or for bad, how other people work that have been working longer than you. And I think that that's super valuable. So I think that the thing that I think about audio school is I think that there's a lot of things that are great, but you got to be cautious and you have to temper your expectations, because I think that there's a lot of people that figure, I'm going to go to audio school, and then when I'm done, I'm going to go to apply to a studio and get a job, or I'll start my own studio and I'll start working. And it's just not that simple like people think it is. And what they don't always realize is that just like when I was looking to figure out what I want to do, I saw this picture of this classroom and it was a recording studio and it looked so cool. Well, there's like 1,000 other people that are having that same experience, and tons and tons of schools are putting audio programs or music technology programs. And so there's just like there's a big market. There's a lot of audio engineers in quotes that are getting pumped into the market every year because they've graduated. I think that there's a lot of schools that do a great job and they really work to prepare the students, but it really comes down to the student themselves. If they are going to apply themselves, if they're going to put in the extra work, they might be able to make it. But if they are going to sit back and just expect that it's going to come to them, expect that people are going to say, oh, you graduated, like, I want to work with you. I've got a bunch of money. Let's go make a record.
This industry doesn't run on entitlement, right? This industry works on just paying your dues and working. Right.
You got to do it, and then you've got to do well enough that someone else is going to randomly hear a record that you did and say, I like that. I want to have someone do that. I want to have that same person work with me. Or you have to have the person you worked with say, this was a great experience, and recommend you to their friends and build like that. It's not just going to come. So,
right. So for you personally, did you have like a moment where you're like an aha moment where you said, this is it, man, I'm doing this for the long haul?
I don't know that I did. I think that there was a slow progression of kind of thinking like, I'm interested in this. This is interesting. I've got the patience to sit and tinker with it, even though I don't know what I'm doing yet. And then when I started going to school, I was finding, hey, like I enjoy this. This is interesting to me. I like knowing about microphones. I like learning about these things. I like getting my hands on faders and like messing with stuff. And some of those like experimenting with things. I liked that. So I don't know if I would say that there was a moment that was like, yeah, this is it. But
it wasn't like love at first sight. It was like a slow falling in love process.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's probably a good description. That it was a thing that developed, and it became a goal, and I worked towards that goal of it becoming my full-time work. So
tell me a bit about your role at Rax Trax. Where do you fall in there? You're the manager, but you're also a freelancer. Tell me about that.
My primary role is that of an engineer. So recording, mixing, mastering, that's my primary role. Because it's a small business, we all kind of handle other elements of it. We wear a couple hats. So I also have like the title of manager, which means that I overseeing our intern team and I handle a lot of the billing and such. Basically, it's just like an extension of being in business for yourself, except I handle that a lot for the studio as well. So all the behind the scenes stuff, I handle a bunch of that as well. But that's like a sliver of my workload, and mostly it's recording. There's a lot of times where the studio manager is like, that's their job, and they primarily do that, and maybe they occasionally do some sessions. But for me, it's way the other way around. It's the most part of my job is working on recording and mixing and whatnot. And then in between that, I make sure that like we do all the things to keep the lights on and make sure bills are paid and accounting is proper and whatnot.
Nice. And but you're like a freelancer, right? You're not employed by the studio.
Right. That's the model of audio in particular in our town. But I think to my knowledge, it's pretty much the thing around the country is that I am an independent contractor. And so I am like when it comes to finances, I am paid by the job. So it's not like, oh, I'm a house engineer, I have a salary or something, and I just, work against that. It's, I bring a job or a job comes in to the studio one way or the other, and I get paid when I am doing that job. That's how I earn. So it's a funny relationship because it's not a standard freelance model in terms of like what you expect of I don't know, someone who's a journalist who writes for a bunch of different papers or magazines or something. Nor is it exactly the same as someone who like goes to a job and does the same job for a salary.
Yeah.
It's kind of this middle ground.
Do you have your own facility at your home or anything like that?
I do. It's something that I have built up over the last couple of years in particular. I've always kind of had a version of it, various degrees of modesty, I guess. But the current space that I'm in had an extra room upstairs, and so I claimed that as my studio space, and I've been working off and on for past little bit to do acoustic treatment and get all that proper, or as proper as I can for a home studio. So it's pretty good.
I'm sure the whole like coronavirus has like expedited getting things going. No?
Yes and no. I mean, it's been fully functional for a while, but I have continued to make improvements on it. So that was one of my tasks during the coronavirus shutdown, is that I finished up building some additional acoustic treatment and did some modification to my existing treatment. I worked with a guy who does acoustics out of Berlin. His name is Jesko, and he runs a website called Acoustics Insider. So I worked with him about doing some design work, and he did some analysis of my room and what I had done so far, and he made some recommendations about some additional bass trapping, some diffusion, so on and so forth. Then I took those plans, modified them to fit within the particulars of a couple things, and built those, and just like finally got some of the last steps installed a couple days ago.
Nice.
So
congrats.
now I got to do all the detail work of putting all the audio system back in and such. Right now it's a bit of it's in an in-between state, but hopefully it'll be back up to full strength pretty soon.
Nice. So tell me a bit about what you look for in an artist when you're trying to see if it's going to be a good fit working together.
I think what I would say that I'm most drawn to, which I think is a good way to answer it, is a certain amount of honesty and a lyrical appeal. So I don't necessarily need to feel like, wow, that song really connects with me, but I want to feel like the artist is connecting with their songs. And so those are some of the best situations, when you've got a good song and good performances and such, but the performances are enhancing the feel of the song, the emotion of the song, and they all work together and it feels real. So those are the things that I'm drawn to, I think. And when an artist really captures that, it does some of the work for you, even in mixing, because you're not trying to manufacture something. You're just trying to shape it so that you're just kind of showcasing what's there in the most efficient and the best way.
Yeah, I was just you sent me a bunch of mixes before we got on the air, and I was just one of them came to mind immediately was what's his last name? D with an S.
Wilson?
Yes, D Wilson. That song was just like so touching, and you could just like hear how like the honesty of the lyrics and like how his performance just like came together. I'm sure really easy because of that.
Yeah, that was a brand new one. That one just got released. Well, depending on when this podcast is released, that one just got released maybe a week or two ago. Written inspired largely by the political climate right now. And
yeah, sure.
This sort of introspective thing that a lot of people are going through in terms of race relations and things like that. So yeah, it's a nice. great song. Yeah. Like you can feel the honesty.
Yeah.
You can see like, okay, he doesn't have all the answers, but he's working on it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Okay, so I guess maybe could you just like run me through like how you begin working with an artist? Like what's your workflow like? How do you onboard them? And then how do you jump into a production?
Usually there's a series of conversations about what's needed. So sometimes I have the information I have demos, I'll have heard the song before. Sometimes I won't. But typically I like to try to find out what is it that they're after? Where are we going? What is their vision for the material? So it's not uncommon for me to try and ask for some references and say like, what is it that you're feeling inspired by? What are some things that you're really into? And sometimes people will send me a link or two, or I've had people make me a whole playlist of stuff and say, these are the things that I'm really feeling. And so I'll go through those things and try to pick between what is a sonic thing and what's a performance thing, what's an emotional thing, and how do they go together. So in the most recent time that I did this, a couple months back, I went through, I don't know, probably a dozen songs and just started to write a brief description of the sound of each of the songs. And just like short items, okay, a little bit about the drum sounds, the snare, the effects, the overall frequency balance, just kind of doing a quick analysis of how does this song sound? Not what is the song like itself, just kind of what does it sound like? And then I started to pick out, here's some similarities, here are some differences. And from that, I kind of would work to build like a descriptive palette, I guess, and say, okay, as we go into track drums, I think that we are looking for this sort of thickness or this sort of dry sound to that, or this brightness here, this sort of roominess there, and establish some of the tonality of what is our goal. Then as we're starting to do the tracking, we're evaluating, hey, is this working? Is this going to do the right thing? Is this fitting? And we go from there. I like to get a lot of it live whenever possible, because I find that you get some of that context right away. There are some elements of choosing tones that are really specific. Snare sounds, for example, are really specific. And if it's the wrong one from the get-go, it makes it really tough in mixing. So, I want to be able to say, hey, let's tune that snare up or down a little bit so it's not fighting with the vocal. Or we need this to be a little longer, a little shorter. We need to adjust this or that, so that when it comes to mixing, I won't be fighting something that would have been a quick fix in the tracking stage.
You're saying it's like all one process, really, basically. You have to, you have like a vision of what the end game is going to sound like.
Right. You have to try to get some of that established. Now, you're not going to know everything. And there's plenty of things that often work out to be a little bit different. But especially if you're working on a process that is getting built up over time, like sometimes we're going to do the basics, and then we're going to start adding layers from there that maybe haven't been written yet.